So it's our first episode of the year, and honestly, the stories we've got tonight are kind of wild. Mushroom caskets, actual burials in these eco-coffins, butter that's made from air, and homes that sort of work with nature instead of just bulldozing it. Are these all just cool eco-trends for a new year? Or is there something stranger going on just underneath everything? If you're new to Spiral Emanations, welcome. This is the show where we dive into real news stories and look for the hidden mysteries and weird connections that nobody else is really talking about. And speaking of things feeling a little upside down, I'm Skye Gracely here in Los Angeles, where our famous Rose Parade, if you haven't heard of it, it's a big New Year's thing here, got completely drenched this year. Umbrellas everywhere, soggy floats, the works. It honestly made the start of the year feel, kind of offbeat for everyone in LA.
Sounds wild, Skye. Over here in London, I'm Reece Barrows. We just had the New Year's Day parade too, and even though it was freezing and the traffic was madness, there were massive crowds out. For once, the whole city sort of felt in sync, starting fresh together, at least until people had to get home.
That vibe, like everything's shifting, even in places that don't usually change much. It's almost everywhere right now. Just look at the headlines. Tonight, we're talking about mushroom casket burials in Maine, butter actually made from air, out of California, yes, really, and these new 3D printed student apartments in Denmark that don't cut down the trees. They just build around them.
When you stack them up, it all sounds super modern and green, but I can't help wondering, maybe these new beginnings are also waking up something much older just under our feet.
You're always saying stuff like that, about cycles and starting fresh. Isn't January actually named after a Roman god? I remember something about him having two faces.
Yeah, that's Janus. He's the god of doorways and transitions, kind of the cosmic doorman in a way. The Romans pictured him with one face looking back at the year that's ending and another gazing forward into what's coming next. That's why January's his month. It's the hinge between old and new.
So every time we do all this New Year's reset energy, we're basically channeling this ancient, two-faced gatekeeper?
Pretty much. In those old stories, he holds the keys to the past and the future at the same time. It's all about honoring what came before, but not letting it trap you, so you can step through into whatever's next. Total in-between energy. And honestly, when you look at all these new ideas and traditions popping up around the world right now, you can really feel that Janus effect. Standing at a threshold, deciding what to carry forward and what to renew.
Right. It's like we're all standing in a doorway, not just personally, but with these new choices people are making out in the world. Speaking of stepping into something new, and maybe a little ancient at the same time, the specifics are honestly fascinating. So, just to start with something that really grabbed me, this happened recently in Maine. It was the first burial in North America using a totally biodegradable mycelium casket. Mark the Anchor was laid to rest on his own land, exactly the way he wanted, to become part of the earth again. The casket he picked, it's called the Loop Living Cocoon, and it's made by this company called Loop Biotech, was grown entirely from mycelium. That process takes just 1 week. And what's wild is, once it's underground, it breaks down completely in around 45 days. So it's a huge shift from traditional burials. And this isn't just a one-time thing. The Green Burial Council is now certifying over 400 green burial locations scattered across the US and Canada. And in Europe, there have already been more than 2,500 mycelium-based burials. To put that in perspective, conventional burials in the US each year use something like 20 million board feet of wood, over 1.5 million tons of concrete, and more than 4 million gallons of embalming fluid. That's according to stats from the Green Burial Council and reported by Loop Biotech and Optimist Daily.
And it's not just the way we handle farewells that's being reimagined. Food is getting a pretty wild makeover too. In California, there's a company called Savor that's making real butter without cows or farmland. Actually, without any agriculture at all. The whole process starts in a lab, with carbon dioxide captured from the air and hydrogen split from water. Their product, what people call air butter, has the exact same triglycerides as dairy butter, so it's chemically real butter, but built from the ground up, or, I guess, from the air down. They use fermentation, some pretty intense chemistry and enzymes, and it's already being served at Starter Bakery in Berkeley and in dishes from some Michelin-starred chefs. Oh, and Bill Gates is backing the company as an investor. The climate impact is tiny. Savor's butter creates less than 0.8 grams of CO2 for every kilogram produced, which is nothing compared to up to 14.7 kilograms from regular dairy butter. Those are numbers right from Savor and Optimist Daily's coverage.
Honestly, I think it's so interesting that these eco-innovations aren't just changing what we consume, they're completely reimagining how we live too. Like over in Denmark, Holstebro to be exact. They're building Europe's biggest 3D printed student housing project. That's 36 apartments, all printed directly on site. So the way it works is they've got a Cobod BOD3 printer, basically this giant construction 3D printer that a crew of just 3 people can operate. Each building gets printed in about 5 days. And for the materials, they're using this super low carbon concrete blend called DFAB with something called FutureSem, which drops emissions even further. The whole thing is run by Nordvestbo, with Saga Space Architects handling the design and 3DCP Group doing the actual construction work. But what I really love is that the apartments are mapped out so they leave the original trees standing and preserve as much green space as possible. So the new buildings actually work around the landscape instead of bulldozing over it. It feels almost old-fashioned in a way, like maybe we've come full circle. Are there places where people have, I don't know, always treated trees as more than just like background scenery?
Oh, for sure. In Japan, there are certain trees considered so sacred that people believe a spirit actually lives inside them, a kami. You'll see these big ancient trees with thick ropes wound around the trunk and paper streamers hanging down. That's called a shimenawa, and it marks the tree as a sort of living shrine, sometimes the heart of an entire community. People leave offerings or say a quick prayer, the way you might greet a wise old neighbor. The idea is the tree remembers everyone who's ever come by, holds their wishes, maybe even watches over the land.
That's really beautiful. I love the idea that a tree can mean so much to a whole community.
Exactly. There's this whole belief that the boundary between people and nature is kind of flexible in a place like that. A tree isn't just a plant, it's a guardian, and in a way, a living archive. So building around the old trees, keeping them right at the center, actually fits perfectly with that. And honestly, it's not just places like Japan. Looking at these new eco-projects, it feels like all over the world, people are starting to reconnect with that kind of respect for nature in totally new ways. So whether it's how we say goodbye, how we eat, or where we live, all these big projects are seriously shifting the way people relate to nature. And they're not just ideas on paper, they're up and running right now, all around the world.
And just so everyone's clear, all of this comes straight from the original sources. Loop Biotech, Green Burial Council, Savor, Starter Bakery, Bill Gates, Nordvestbo, Saga Space Architects, and 3DCP Group, with the reporting in outlets like Optimist Daily and Fox News.
You know, hearing about these new green burials and the way buildings are being printed around living trees, it all really does make me think of old stories. There's something ancient about not just preserving nature, but actually winding ourselves right into it. It kind of reminds me, well, have you ever heard of Yggdrasil? That's the world tree from Norse mythology. This idea of a living network underneath everything, linking all the realms together.
I mean, I know the name, but I always get fuzzy on what makes it such a big deal. What's the actual story?
Picture a tree so gigantic, its roots stretch all the way into the underworld, and its branches hold up the heavens. In the old Norse stories, Yggdrasil wasn't just a symbol, it was the center of absolutely everything. Gods would gather at its trunk to make decisions. Down beneath, a giant serpent nibbled at the roots, while an eagle perched at the very top, carrying news across the worlds. There are 9 realms hanging off the tree: Asgard for the gods, Midgard for humans, places for giants, elves, even the land of the dead.
So it's like the original fiber optic cable, just made out of wood?
Exactly, but with way more drama. Yggdrasil was how all the different worlds stayed entwined. The Norse believed even a ripple in its branches could set off huge changes across every realm. And the best bit? Even when things die or get destroyed around it, the tree keeps cycling back, sprouting new growth, sheltering old secrets. It's almost like the roots themselves are holding on to everything that's ever happened, keeping the world's memory alive.
That actually makes me wonder, do you think people back then literally believed the earth could remember? Like, did they see memory as something real in the roots and soil? Or is that just us making it sound poetic after the fact?
It's a good question. I mean, for a lot of ancient cultures, certain trees or groves were special, sometimes even sacred. They weren't just there. They were thought of as keepers of wisdom, places where something lingered. Not exactly a memory card buried in the ground, I guess, but kind of a living library. And then now, you hear scientists talking about mycelium, the stuff that makes up mushrooms, calling it nature's internet. It's like modern science keeps stumbling onto ideas that sound, honestly, a lot like myth.
Okay, but when you say nature's internet, is that just a catchy label? Or do you mean forests are actually, like, wired together somehow?
Oh, it's real. Under the ground, mycelium forms these massive webs. Think miles of superfine threads connecting the roots of nearly every tree and plant in a forest. Scientists have found that trees use this network to send nutrients to each other, literally sharing food when one is struggling, and even passing chemical messages, like a warning if bugs or disease show up. They've started calling it the wood wide web. And it kind of flips the whole idea of a forest. It's not just a bunch of individual trees, it's this networked, talking, helping community. Some of the older trees, they call them mother trees, can even look after seedlings by funneling sugars straight to their roots.
That's wild. So trees have their own secret underground group chat?
Exactly. A whole network humming right under our feet all the time. And the more scientists dig into it, the more it starts to look like those old Norse and Japanese stories might have been onto something. And honestly, if you pay attention, you start seeing signs of that hidden network popping up in the real world too.
I've heard that at some of these new green burial sites, people have noticed clusters of mushrooms springing up afterward. Not just a few, sometimes a lot. And sometimes there are these really striking, almost geometric patterns on the leaves and bark nearby. Maybe it's just a natural thing, but it gets people joking like, is the land picking up on who's joined it now?
You know, people have been noticing things like that for centuries. In a lot of old cultures, mushrooms weren't just background, they were treated as guides or even messengers between worlds. In Central America, carvings shaped like mushrooms have actually been found in ancient burial sites, as if they were placed there to help the spirit move on. And in parts of Siberia, shamans would use special fungi during funerals, almost like sending the soul off with a map for the journey. So it's not surprising that when mushrooms pop up in places of burial, people start to feel like a boundary is being crossed, or at least that something mysterious is happening there. That sense is probably where a lot of old British graveyard legends and even fairy ring stories get their start. And that totally fits with British and Celtic folklore too. Around grave sites especially, British folklore has legends of woods that whisper, trees that seem to watch you. Maybe these green burials are opening people up to that, or maybe they're actually stirring something in the land, who knows. And mushrooms always seem to end up at the crossing points for this kind of thing. Take fairy rings, you know, those almost perfect circles of mushrooms you sometimes see at the edge of a field or wood.
Okay, can I just say, I've seen fairy rings in parks and stuff, but I never actually knew what made them spooky. What's the deal with all the legends?
So, fairy rings are these circles that just show up overnight. And for centuries, people thought they were made when fairies, or sometimes witches, would dance there during the night. The main superstition was never to step inside one. Some say if you did, you could get trapped, made to dance with the fairies for what might feel like minutes, but actually lasts years. There are stories of folks vanishing or suddenly reappearing decades later, unchanged or not remembering where they'd been.
That's wild. So would anyone ever just walk out like nothing happened?
Rarely. They might come back with some weird side effect, like aging all at once, or suddenly being able to play music, or knowing things they shouldn't. But there was almost always some kind of price. So if you spot a perfect ring of mushrooms, British folklore says you should just admire it from the outside. And it's not just fairy rings either. Mushrooms have always been linked to those places where the boundary between worlds feels a little thinner, whether it's out in the woods or even around grave sites.
Yeah, I think I'll keep to the sidewalks, just in case. But honestly, are all those mushrooms at burial sites just about what's happening in the soil? Or could there be something else going on too?
Well, the straightforward answer is it's about nutrients. Mushrooms thrive on organic matter, especially where things are breaking down. But in British and Celtic folklore, those patches are thought to mark spots where strange or unexplained things can happen, almost like the land holding on to memories.
Speaking of mushrooms and boundaries, it makes me think of that air butter from California. If people are making food using microbes that connect to this kind of network, could that be like real-life fairy food? In British and Celtic folklore, eating something enchanted almost always changes you. Wasn't butter kind of a big deal in old European folklore, Reece? Like, didn't people believe it could attract fairies or witches?
Oh, for sure. In places like Ireland and Scotland, butter was almost its own form of magic. People used to believe fairies or witches could sneak in and steal your butter, especially if you left it out overnight or skipped the proper rituals. On churning day, you'd find folks tucking little bits of iron or rowan wood into the churn to keep the mischief away, or reciting charms while they stirred. And there was this thing called fairy butter. If you found strange lumps of yellow fungus in the fields, it was thought to be a sign that fairies had been out celebrating, leaving behind their own supernatural leftovers.
That's wild. So something as simple as butter was basically a magnet for weirdness if you weren't careful.
Totally. It was this ordinary thing, but it could tip you right into the in-between, part food, part offering, part invitation for whatever else might be wandering around unseen. Makes eating air butter in Berkeley seem almost tame by comparison, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess compared to that, modern fairy food is pretty safe. But it does make me wonder, in those British and Celtic fairy tales, what actually happened to people who ended up eating the real enchanted stuff?
Oh, absolutely. There are loads of stories where fairy food will wipe out your memories or drop you back home with new tricks you can't explain, playing an instrument you've never learned, or suddenly speaking in strange rhymes. And who knows, with modern food tech, maybe we'll all be getting a few odd side effects here and there. Just instead of harp solos, it's like wild baking skills.
Well, if I wake up painting or writing out of nowhere, I'm blaming the butter. Mark my words.
And it's not just about the food or the burials either. I was reading about those new 3D printed homes, the ones that are built around living roots instead of clearing the land. If you think about it, people might end up finding odd sprouts or little patches of moss popping up indoors, right along the root lines. Not all at once, just little reminders the world's still growing under your feet.
Honestly, I kind of love it. Well, assuming I'm not pulling wild violets out of my kitchen every morning. I can barely keep up with the plants I already have.
Maybe that's what's really happening here. What looks like futuristic green tech is also a way of letting those old Norse, Celtic and Japanese stories sneak back in. Like we're seeing the myths from those traditions happen bit by bit. One mushroom, one root, one unexpected vine at a time.
It does make you wonder what else we might notice changing around us, now that we're starting to live this way.
I actually get that. So with these mushroom caskets, mycelium burials, they're not just about the body becoming soil. The way I've been reading about it, there's this whole idea that on a chemical level, maybe even with the patterns from a person's life, some of that gets picked up by the mycelium network beneath us. Not just nutrients, but potentially even impressions, like faint traces of memory or mood.
That's actually kind of beautiful. Is that just a poetic idea, or did people really believe it, that the land could actually remember who was buried there?
Oh, it's way older than poetry. Loads of cultures believe the earth held onto people, not just their bodies, but their stories. In some parts of Africa, the earth is seen as a living ancestor itself, full of memory. The ancient Celts built burial mounds as a way of letting the dead both protect and haunt the land for generations. Even in China, it's said the spirit gets anchored right into the soil through burial, shaping the luck or the health of the place.
So with these green burials using mycelium, do you think the fungus could actually keep a piece of who someone was? Not just their body, but something personal, like memories?
It's possible. We're kind of plugging ourselves back into this idea that the land can remember us, which shows up in both science and folklore. Scientists talk about mycelium as nature's internet. It connects roots and lets plants share information underground. And in British and Celtic folklore, people saw fairy rings, the mushroom circles, as places where stepping inside could change you, or you might hear strange music. Maybe those rings are places where the network is most active, and something unique does get left behind in the roots or soil. You even see the same connection in things like air butter, made from microbes in the environment, or homes that keep old tree roots in place. All of this is helping keep the network alive and keeps us linked to it.
That makes sense. In those British and Celtic stories, people would see repeating patterns in leaves, or hear whispers from the woods, or just suddenly know things they'd never learned. Do you think, now that we're doing more with nature, that might explain why people still have these odd experiences?
Exactly. It's like the old stories about groves and mushroom rings, were people noticing a kind of living archive, almost like the world tree or the mycelium network. Now that we're using green tech, eating new eco-foods, or building around roots, maybe we're just making that archive more active, leaving our own marks that float back up in small, strange ways.
So next time you're out in the woods, or you spot a little patch of mushrooms or a big old tree, just slow down and see what you notice. Maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's the earth remembering and sending a little hello back.
You know, hearing you talk about slowing down and noticing things in nature, it actually brings to mind all those old folk stories. There are so many warnings, like don't eat anything you find in a fairy ring, or watch where you wander in the woods. And maybe those weren't just superstitions. I wonder if people back then were picking up on the idea that some places really do hold on to something, like old memories or a kind of presence, even if they didn't have words for it.
Yeah, totally. I think about that whenever I have one of those moments where I walk into a new place. I mean, I've never been there before, but for some reason, it feels weirdly familiar. Not just, oh, this looks nice, but almost like I've come back to a spot I know, except I don't. It does make me wonder if, something deeper is happening, if it's this network, or whatever you want to call it, sort of quietly reaching out. And I can't be the only one, right? If anyone listening has ever noticed something unusual, like mushrooms growing in a perfect ring, or a pattern in bark or leaves that felt familiar, or even just got the sense that a place was kind of reaching out to you, those little moments are worth paying attention to. It doesn't have to be anything huge. Even the smallest moment that made you pause can be special.
Honestly, I don't know exactly what it all means, but I do think if we start paying more attention, just taking a little time to notice those small, odd details around us, that might be how we begin figuring out what this connected web beneath our feet is really about.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. After a night of talking about green burials, butter made from air, and those wild 3D printed homes that keep all the trees, I'm realizing there's probably a lot more happening between people and nature than I ever notice. I mean, it's easy to just walk by something and not even wonder what's really going on underneath.
Yeah, absolutely. You saying that makes me want to pay a lot more attention this year too. Once you start actually looking, really looking, you find the world is full of surprises, even in the most ordinary spots.
And honestly, just taking a moment to notice what stands out to you. Maybe it's a new ring of mushrooms you haven't seen before, or strange patterns on leaves after all this rain, or just something in nature that seems off. All those little moments help you see these connections a little bit better. Thanks so much for hanging out with us tonight. Hope your year starts off with something a little bit magical. Good night from Spiral Emanations.